Hey, Crunk Chocolate and Tom Bomb here, bringing you some WSL flavor. Bright and early recording for us. We just saw each other last night. How are you feeling, Tom Bomb? Are you sick of me yet?
No, not yet, not yet.
Yes.
But
It, fantastic game
you
today.
know, like I get to see you twice in twice in less than 24 hours.
I
Absolutely.
know.
Why would I be
This is
upset about
great. Thank you for warming my heart already.
that?
Uh, big game is this weekend for our baby blue baddies as they welcome the reigning WSL champions Chelsea to Troy Stadium. For those who will be watching the match at home, we, Shades of Blue, will be having a live watch along for City versus Chelsea, streaming through FanFest Live. You can watch on YouTube and X as well. A link and to that is all in our episode details. But right now, if you're watching on YouTube, hit that thumbs up, show us some love in the comments, and for your audio files, prefer the podcast experience. Rate and review on whatever podcasting app you use. 5 stars are what's the point. Wow, Shady Gang. Do we have a most dope guest for you today? Freelance women's football writer. Flops couldn't recommend you enough, and getting a compliment from them is not easy. If you look at our guest banner photo, they are holding a Sky Sports mic. I assume they're about to do some work. If you want to hear them on other podcasts, I don't know why you would, but sharing is caring. They were on Counterpressed with Flo, Lloyd, Hughes, chatting with Musa, Okwanga. I was like, maybe want to find out more about the enemy Chelsea? They were on Blue Royalty Podcast as well. Shady Gang, show some love to Jessy Parker-Humpreys. How's it
Hey
going?
guys. Wow. What a welcome. This is the best
Yes.
welcome I've ever
Uh,
had on a podcast. I can't
Yes.
yes, that's exactly what I wanted to hear.
lie.
That's what we try to do here at Shades of Blue.
Welcoming
We're a
vibes.
welcoming, loving group. Yes, especially because we're a city-based pod, and some people they don't know how to handle us. They're a little hesitant, and so we just try to big welcome, opening arms, just break that ice
Yes.
ourselves. Hello, how are you?
I'm good, thanks guys. How are you? How are you guys feeling after opening weekend?
Feeling really good. It's always good to, especially you all can relate to this. Just had like this, what, your first WSL season opening win in what, almost 4 years, 5 years?
Thanks for
Um,
reminding me. Yeah.
but like we've also experienced something similar over the last 3 years for certain. So getting off on the right foot, it definitely helps a lot, especially when you don't have your main goal scorer. So that's always a plus. So like that's something that we both have in common.
Yeah, when looking at the lineup the first time and seeing Kiara Keating starting, that I don't know what I was anticipating, what I was expecting, but seeing that name first threw everything off. And I was like, as long as we get points, I don't really care what happens today. Obviously, this match is going to be an experience, and an experience it
Yes.
was. So happy to get those 3 points.
So I kind of actually, oh,
How?
go ahead.
Oh, sorry. No, you go, Tom.
Actually, I kind of want to start in goal because like there's kind of some mirroring in City and Chelsea on that. In that Zecira Musovic did get the start, excuse me, against
Sorry,
Spurs.
Tom's still cutting out for me.
Oh, hold
Mm.
on. What about now?
I
Is that
can
a
hear
little
you
bit
now.
better?
Yeah, I could hear the start of your sentence
Perfect.
and then you went again.
Yay! I actually wanted to start at goalkeeper for Chelsea, actually. It seems like Zecira Musovic got the start against Spurs over AKB, which was probably as surprising for you as it was to see Kiara Keating start for us. Is there
Sorry,
is
it
there
cut
a
out
method
again.
to Emma's Met?
I can kind of like hear an echo, but
Hmm. Echo.
Hold on, we're gonna try something different.
can you hear him?
Weird. Turned echo cancellation off for me too.
Frank, you should go ahead with your question, and we can go from there.
Um. Yeah. Well. Let's see. So Tom Bomb was going a little specific positionally, I wanted to start wide in a simple, easy softball question. Why are they so good? Why is Chelsea so good? Why? What is with all this dominance? Six in last seven. Can you share some winning for other people? And I know that's kind of like smugging me saying being a Man City men's side fan, but still, give some trophies to other people.
Yeah, well, I guess it's a similar kind of thing, right? It's just Chelsea have become a team that obviously are familiar with winning, and I think that's helped them a lot over the past couple of years. You know, they've really like got the mentality element down, and then I think also in Emma Hayes, they've, in my opinion, probably got the best tactical manager in the league. Other people disagree with that. I think she's a bit of a occasionally controversial figure, right? But then on top of that as well, the club's brought that investment that's allowed them to bring, you know, a whole host of superstars in. But I guess the interesting thing is, you know, teams like Arsenal and City, they have spent as well. It's not really, I guess, you know, I guess in some ways it is a bit like the Premier League, whereby, you know, it's not like City just spend anymore. Um, but I just think that combination of that, the spending, the setup, the years of winning, and a coach who just sets really high standards for a team who's been there for a really long time, all of those things have just added up to total Chelsea dominance. And sort of we go into every season and people say, you know, this will be the year, this will be the year that someone else wins, and we get to the end of it and Chelsea still win anyway. And it's funny because I think, to be honest, this year this Chelsea squad is stronger, in my opinion, than it has been in the past 2 years. Um, so I think it's going to be a tough ask for other teams, but I think a lot of Chelsea's dominance has happened domestically as a result of their failure to have any sustained success in Europe. And I think every season it kind of comes down to how well
Mm.
Chelsea will do it in Europe.
So you're saying the chance for us is you, the Chelsea doing better in Champions League. How I guess how do you feel about their chances in Champions League?
I mean, I feel kind of good.
Ooh.
I think Chelsea were a lot better last year than they obviously were the year before. They went out the group stage. I think, as I said, the squad's a lot stronger. They're a lot more proofed against injuries. Whereas, you know, by last year, by the time they were playing the semi final against Barcelona, there was no Millie Bright available. There was no Kanisha Buchanan available. Pernilla Harder was coming back from a long term injury. Frank Kirby was out as well. So I think all of those things, you know, being sort of proofed a lot better, um, will help Chelsea. But so much of Champions League is about the draw, and it's about who you get, and it's about how your team holds up across the season. So I think it has to be a bit of one of those wait and see things.
Tom Baum was asking about just the overall squad depth. It really made some powerful moves over the summer. Offensively, even bringing in Ashley Lawrence. So were these moves in order to hopefully for Champions League to do move further? Because as someone, I'm the one who's relatively new to women's football. Really dove all in when we started the show. The show's about to hit our second year, third year. Sorry, third year, and there's so much I still don't understand. And one big thing is how can Chelsea have so much dominance in a domestic league and not necessarily struggle, but not see the similar success in the Champions League?
Yeah, that's really the $1 billion question if you're associated with Chelsea. I think the Champions League test has been tough for a number of reasons. I think um, it's taken Chelsea a long time to believe that they can like do well in the Champions League. I think it's they've come up against some tough teams at different points. I think at points they've been just tactically outsmarted by teams who've maybe been playing European football for longer than Chelsea. Obviously, we did reach the final, 3 seasons ago now, but then absolutely just got battered by Barcelona, which has happened to a number of teams, but was just like a particularly sort of bleak moment for the club. And yeah, I think lots of the signings that have been made, players like Ashley Lawrence, obviously Kat Macario, she's still injured at the moment, but again, she's someone who has like this really high level experience. Lawrence has that experience with PSG. She has like that high level international experience with Canada as well. I think it's all about building a team who have the technical ability and sort of the mental capacity to compete at that higher stage. Because look, we kind of know Chelsea can win a WSL. That's not really a question anymore, right? It's the Champions League that Hayes will still have her eye on.
And is that what's can your can the Chelsea squad stay hungry? And I know that's just such a awful phrase in sporting, being hungry for winning the UWCL. Is that something that the players want to do, or do you think that's just like an Emma Hayes like wall she personally wants to break through?
Oh no, I think the players really care about it. Look, like almost everyone in this squad has won a ton at domestic level. Like even someone like Sam Kerr, like everyone who's in this squad, they've won 4 league titles, 3 FA Cups, Conti Cups. And almost none of them have won Champions Leagues. Really, in the current squad, you're looking at Macario, who again, obviously hasn't played for Chelsea yet, and Khadijah Buchanan, who obviously was also at Lyon prior. So yeah, I think it is I think it's something that all of those players want, because everyone recognizes that that is the true test. It's like you guys are City fans, right? It's the same on the men's side. There's always this sense that no matter how much everyone knows you are a good team because of what you do domestically, until you do it in Europe, everyone has that like question mark hanging over you still.
I listened to you and Abdullah on the London is Blue podcast this morning, and one of the things that both of you made, the points that both of you made, was the depth that you all had in the squad, like how almost the squad that you started versus Spurs in some ways felt like um, a cup squad, or like almost a second choice squad with the talent that wasn't available, like Sam Kerr, like Aaron Cuthbert. You had the Canadians, uh, Fleming, Lawrence, and Buchanan all on the bench. And you all did make the point that all of them played 180 minutes against Jamaica in their Olympic qualifier. Um, do you feel like because of the depth of the squad, a lot of matches are going to see a lot of rotation, or do you feel like Emma's going to kind of settle into, once everyone is more healthy, a more established squad going forward?
Yeah, I think definitely we will see as the season goes on. Like, I think it'll become clearer who, say, the favourites are, particularly in those like midfield areas. I think that's like a big question mark right now. And defensively as well, the fullback areas. I think the other ones where we don't really know who's going to be first choice there. But at the same time, I think Emma Hayes made more changes to her starting lineup last season than any other manager. Obviously, that's partly like injury related, but I think she's very aware that to kind of compete on a lot of fronts domestically and in Europe, that you need to have players available. And I think what the starting lineup at Spurs showed was that she will take risks with playing players who maybe aren't her first choices in positions. I'm thinking like Johanna Rytting-Kaneryd, for example, and believe that the strength of the collective will like ride them through those games in order to say not risk a player who, yeah, for example, has played 180 minutes on an international break, or like Fran has just come back from an injury. So I think that's something we'll see as the season goes on. It is going to be really interesting, especially having a game as big as City away, um, straight up, because like, look, last season we lost 2 games. It was Liverpool away first day of the season, and then City away. Um, and we've historically really, really struggled to go and play you guys away, at the Joy Stadium, as it's now known. So I think it's going to be really interesting in terms of like Aaron Cuthbert and Sam Kerr weren't available at all for the Spurs game. Does that, like, is she really going to take a risk on them to then start against City? like 7 days after, to me that kind of feels unlikely.
Mm.
But then at the same time, was she just like wanting to keep her powder dry, to bring them out? And I guess it's similar to stuff that City have as well, right? With like Bunny Shaw, she got a knock, she didn't feature against West Ham. Is Taylor going to really throw her in against Chelsea? So I think it's really like leaves these teams in a really interesting position in terms of like neither of them really knowing exactly what the other one is going to do heading into the game.
I saw so many similarities, particularly in the first week in Chelsea and City. Just first of all, with goalkeeper choice, I think that we as City fans were very shocked to see Kiera Keating start over Ellie Roebuck. And then I know AKB has been the long established starter for Chelsea, and to see Zachira Musovic get the start was I mean, and she has played. I mean, obviously, based off of her World Cup form, she's been very hot. But it was just kind of like, oh, that was not who I expected to see in goal. Um, so just kind of seeing that going forward, where do you have any sense? Because like I know that we have talked to people and we have no sense of why Keating got the start over Roebuck. Do you kind of have any insight as to why Zachira is kind of getting those starts over Musovic?
No, I think I mean I'm less confused about Zachira starting over AKB than I am about Keating starting over Roebuck. I think the gap's slightly slightly different. But it was still a surprise. I think, every Chelsea women's fan you talk to would still say that they believe AKB is the best goalkeeper at Chelsea Football Club. But I think we've seen last season that Hayes wants to rotate her goalkeepers. There was a period of time at the start of this year, at the start of 2023, where AKB seemed to have been dropped. That's where Zachira played maybe her best game when we played at Arsenal at the Emirates in a 1-1 draw. Um, and I think we're kind of seeing the same thing again. Ultimately, I feel like Emma Hayes doesn't want anyone to be comfortable that they're going to start. I think realistically, there's maybe three Chelsea players who, if they're fit, they start every game, and that's Sam Kerr, Guro Reiten, and Millie Bright. And I think Emma Hayes would probably like it ideally if that wasn't even the case with that lot. So I feel like also the I think the long term idea with Musovic has been that she's better with the ball at her feet than AKB. Chelsea have historically had problems with AKB playing out from the back. There have been a couple of times, especially in the Champions League, actually, where she's really struggled and Chelsea have conceded important goals as a result. And I think that's initially why the Musovic focus came in. But the problem is that, and we saw that against Tottenham, is that Musovic isn't as good as a shot stopper as AKB, and she tends to make silly mistakes. Now you can argue Berger does the same with the ball at her feet. But yeah, I think Hayes clearly rates Musovic higher than most people watching Chelsea rates her. We've seen at the World Cup what she can do, but the question is whether she can do that consistently. And I think the answer is still, unfortunately, no. Even, her amazing game against the USA was then sort of followed up by some rather spurious defending against Spain in their semi-final, defending goalkeeping in their semi-final. And arguably, the goals that Spain scored, maybe she should have saved. So it's going to be an interesting one. Musovic is definitely a more established goalkeeper at Chelsea than I think many would expect, and it'll be really interesting if she does start against City. But I've really, honestly, got no idea at this point. Maybe Hannah Hampton will start.
Who knows? I don't know what it is about her play, but Musovic gives me big Sarah Buadi vibes in that she can dominate a game, but like once a game she's gonna make a like why would you do that
Right.
type of play? Like and I can't every time that I see her I can't get that out of my head. It's like, oh, like she might dominate everything in the box, but like is she gonna make that one play that's just gonna like let the other team in the match?
Yeah, and against Spurs, that was the case, right? She makes 9 saves against Tottenham. She has the best like post-shot XG like ratio of any goalkeeper in the WSL. Like she prevents like a ton of goals based on the shots that were taken, but then she also palms the Grace Clinton shot into her feet, and Martha Thomas gets a goal, and Chelsea spend the last 20 minutes of the game looking like super, super nervous in a game they were really comfortable in. And, that's just one of those things where you're like, how much of that can you iron out of someone's game? I don't know. I think she has got better in the time that she's been at Chelsea. So to that extent, maybe Chelsea feel like she's on the right path, and you've got a player to give her the opportunity to show she is. But it would feel, I think, odd to start against City given what happened in the Spurs game. But I've really given up predicting, you know, I could have sat and predicted Chelsea lineups for you for an hour before the game against Spurs, and I wouldn't have told you the players we actually went out on the pitch with.
So one of the other things that I definitely saw kind of as a mirror was starting a like both Chelsea and City did start four defenders, but they used a fullback higher up the pit or in a different role than like a traditional back four. So they were playing more as a back three. I think that when you saw City do it, you would see Laya Alexandri invert into the midfield or Layla Wahhabi invert into the midfield, and you could kind of see that when they did that, when City did that, it was trying to either isolate the opposite winger, whether it be Mary Fowler, who was playing out left, or Chloe Kelly, that was playing out right. Um, Chelsea did it a little something more, a little different when they pushed Nima Charles higher up the pitch, and she was definitely the player of the match for that particular match. Now I know that we are on you and Abdullah on the London is Blue podcast had talked about having three fullbacks who could essentially play both of those positions. Um, is that is that a role that Ashley Lawrence, like what Neem Charles did against Spurs, is that something that Ashley Lawrence has that you think that she could perhaps play in that role? Is that something that Eve Parasek could do in that role and just allow those three back defenders of Melody Carter and Millie Bright just to play it kind of as a back three?
Yeah, I think it's something that Chelsea have sort of experimented with on and off, this like crooked back four, in that it kind of looks like you're playing a three with wing backs, but like one of your wing backs isn't a wing back at all. They're a winger. And obviously, yeah, Canner had kind of had that role, not that she actually did much with it, against Spurs, but then Niamh Charles, you could very clearly see when Chelsea had the ball, she was pushing up, but when they weren't, it was like a flat back four, and she was kind of doing the defensive work that went alongside it. I definitely think it's something that Ashley Lawrence can do. I know she played for Canada as a wing back in this most recent international break in those games against Jamaica. Funnily enough, with Chloe Lacasse, who then played wing back for Arsenal this weekend, and she looked rubbish doing it. So, but I've only watched like little clips of Lawrence doing it for Canada. I've not watched that full game, but people who did watch the full game tell me she looked very good doing the wing back role, doing the thing higher up the pitch. But equally, then Charles looked really good doing it, and I think would deserve to start in that same kind of position against City. Obviously, it'll be really interesting to see how that would work because with Alexandri and I mean, I guess Layla Wahhabi with the red cards won't play, so we'll have to wait and see who comes in. I guess in terms of Morgan and Kasparai and how maybe that changes Taylor's game plan. But if, say, Laya was going to play on that right hand side and invert, it suddenly creates a huge amount of space for Niamh Charles, who's going to be out even wider than a normal fullback would be, and ask a lot, I think, of Kennedy in terms of covering, coming across and covering all of that space, especially because what's so interesting, I guess, with the way City are inverting their fullbacks at the moment is that you don't really see any team invert both of their fullbacks. Like, it's certainly not something I've watched a lot of, and I think it's very clever because you can see the triggers from like whichever centre back has the ball is like telling them who's going to invert, and it makes it harder for the opposition to, I guess, predict it. Like you're not just going to get this guarantee that, for example, your left winger's got a free run at the space where Alexandri should be because it's not necessarily going to be her inverting. But um, I do think it's also quite obvious that that's what they're doing. Like if I can watch the game and I can see that that's what they're
Right,
doing,
right,
so of
right.
Chelsea. So I think it's going to be really, really interesting to see how Taylor like adjusts for that, and also like what Chelsea think maybe they can do with that space, because it's one thing to do it against West Ham, because yeah, of course Alana Kennedy, Alex Greenwood can pretty much handle, you know, Rico Eki and Vivi Asai, but it's very different if you potentially got a front three of like Wright and Kerr and Lauren James, and suddenly you might only have two defenders there for them. Because what was crazy against West Ham, right, is that it wasn't even just that Alexandria or Lelo Arby were inverting. They were like in as tens
Yeah.
basically at points.
Yes,
And I don't
yes.
think they'll end up that high against Chelsea, obviously, but if you've got to be very careful, right? Because if you've done it in one game, to then like just slightly change it in another game, I do think's tricky.
Mm.
So I was going back and looking at City matches against Chelsea and just kind of I think that as City fans as a whole, we are used to our teams having the ball, and the matches where City has had the most success against Chelsea are matches where they did not win the possession battle, like that 2-0 victory at the end of last season. And I'm not sure if I couldn't figure out if that was more of a function of the fact that Chelsea had just played a Champions League match midweek in that particular. So there was a lot of squad rotation. I think that Lauren James came out at halftime in that particular match, um, or if that was like a tactic that other clubs have used against Chelsea, to like just say, because I like even against Spurs, you guys did not like have the majority of the ball, did you?
I think we had like 55%, but it was pretty even given that we were playing a team who finished what, like 10th last season.
To, right. So like is that I mean is that a tactic that other teams have tried and succeeded? Like just make Chelsea play with the ball and like we're not going to let Lauren James and Guru Wrighton and Sam Kerr play us on the break because we know that we're going to get our back broken. So I'm sure a lot of that had to do with the fact that Fran Kirby last season was injured, um, just not being able to possess the or not being able to possess the ball and be dangerous and then turn it over to other teams. So is that a tactic that you've seen work against Chelsea, or is that like maybe just certain situationally that might work, but it doesn't work as a whole?
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting because like I was kind of intrigued by this question as well. So I was looking up like City versus Chelsea, and City have their like lowest average possession like in the history of the like WSL. If you average against their games against Chelsea versus their average of their games against everyone else,
Yeah.
and it's like pretty much 50-50 between City and Chelsea, which I think just speaks to like the general dominance of like both teams and them being quite even over a long period of time. But yeah, I feel like I don't know whether it's as much a tactic on City's bases as just like Chelsea are maybe better at winning the ball off them than other teams are. I do think it's a good idea to give Chelsea the ball, because as you've kind of like hinted at there, like so much of what Chelsea do very well is about high turnovers and quick breaks. Um, Chelsea are literally like the queens of like turning over the ball in the final third and getting shots off as a result. Um, and obviously, if you're then a team who has a lot of the ball, it makes it very well, you're risking being pressed a lot more. I think specifically that 2-0, it like I don't want to say it needs an asterisk because I don't want to do City down. Like I thought they played really, really well, but Chelsea were kind of yeah in between these two Lyon games. City scored two like excellent goals, and then Emma Hayes just like had a meltdown. Like Lauren James didn't go off at half time; she went off after 35 minutes. Her and Sophie Ingle went
Yes,
off after
yes,
35
yes.
minutes. And it was totally unnecessary because I really don't think we were that bad. I think the XG from that game is like City finished on zero point 0.9 and Chelsea finished on zero point 0.6. But it was like Hayes just had this I think when we were 2-0 down, she was just like, fuck it, I don't care anymore. Like, we've lost this game. I'm just going to, like, preserve everything for Leon. And that's what I mean when I say, like, Chelsea will always prioritize the Champions League. Like, she, like, did not care at that point. So I think this will obviously be a bit different in that sense. Of Chelsea will be fresher, but you've also obviously, I think, got this thing which is City's, like, massive advantage this season, and it's like generally really surprised me how underrated City have gone into this season being, because everyone's like they only signed Joe Rord, and I'm like, but they didn't need to sign anybody else, like because no one left, obviously other than Russo. So I think that's the City's like massive advantage, that that team is settled. Like, okay, maybe Shaw's not fit to play, and we've got this slightly like strange front three where Hemp's the 9 and Mary Fowler's out wide, which like actually I hate. But maybe Taylor switches that round and put Hemp out wide. I know like they had like 15 minutes or so in that West Ham game, right, where they did that. But I think that's really is what to City's benefit going into this game. They know how they want to play and they know how they set up, and like just like take Chelsea's midfield, there are so many different combinations and none of them feel like super tried and tested recently. Like obviously maybe the like most like relied upon combination would be, for example, Sophie Ingle and Erin Cuthbert. But I don't think Sophie Ingle's necessarily mobile enough in a game like this, and Erin Cuthbert's been injured for all of preseason. So it just feels really unlikely that she's gonna play. So then like maybe Shokunis can start like at Spurs, but you saw at Spurs like she got overrun a lot on the ball and she turned the ball over a lot. So I think you could tell she couldn't deal with the intensity. And I think especially City, if they're gonna sort of play with the 2-3-10s in like Rord and Castellanos, or I guess if Angodal comes back into the team, that's what feels I think concerning to me, that like Chelsea just aren't settled in that sense at all.
Mm-hmm.
See, I got the sense that one of the reasons that Dana Castellanos started was because in the midfield was because Bunny Shaw was not available. Because my thought was coming into the season that we, based off of World Cup play, we would probably see a midfield three of Hasegawa, Angeldal, and Roord, with Hasegawa and Angeldal sitting more in a double pivot and giving Roord more space to create. And I just thought that Castellanos got the call over Angeldal in this particular match just because Bunny Shaw wasn't fit. So but I do believe that yes, if we do have a current advantage, it would be in like that central midfield. Just because I don't think that people realize how good Yui Hasegawa actually is. And I'm glad that she had such a good tournament in the World Cup, because like I don't think she's one of like probably the top six in the world, and that's not her natural position. Like that's so why.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that's one of the weird things about to me that's kind of one of the weird things about the inverting fullbacks, is that, or at least I definitely felt like this at West Ham, that I felt like they ended up with more of the ball than Yui. And that
Yes.
was just like one thing I didn't get. I thought it like worked in that obviously it's like you can't just sit a player on Yui if you've then got either Wahhabi or Alexandre there, you then have to like push either two players up or like you've got one player distracted between the two. But I did find it strange that it felt like then as a result that like lots of the build-up play bypassed her.
Yes.
Which I don't know if that's just like a
Yes.
facet of like kind of figuring it out, and like obviously we are at the start of the season, and just because City's personnel hasn't changed doesn't mean they're not tweaking stuff, right? Like tactically.
Right.
But yeah, that was just something that I found a bit odd. Like maybe in that it wasn't Yui who then pushed up. Like if it was me, I'd have like inverted Alexandre and then sat her there so Yui could go. But it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't that. Yui stayed.
Yes.
Yes.
So I think that will be really interesting to see too, because especially because Chelsea play at the moment with such a definitive 10, who's probably going to be, whether it's LJ or whether it's Frank Herbie or even I guess Chankovic, having that like extra defensive body there would kind of make sense. Um, but yeah, I don't know whether that's going to be like something long term we're going to see. That's what's so hard, right? To like talk about these teams after one game.
Right. So I guess based off of the fact that we've only seen one match from every, all 12 sides in the league, um, what would be your biggest overreaction to your own squad? And then what would be your biggest overreaction to the league as a whole?
Overreaction in terms of being like, what am I freaking out about? Or,
What am I freaking out about, or what am I going to say like this is good, this is why this player is going to win the Ballon d'Or,
right.
or like lead the league in assists or goals or what have you?
Right. Um, I think in terms of like a Chelsea thing, my like biggest overreaction will be that like me official will do a lot better, a lot quicker at Chelsea than I think everyone expected. Um, I really felt like she was gonna kind of come in and be like Sam's backup, and my overreaction based off one game is that like I think actually they'll like they like she has the ability to like actually really push Sam, not just sit there. I mean, Hayes said before the game like if Sam was fit, Sam would have started. So the hierarchy is clear, but I think like the relationship that she showed she has with like Lauren James after literally one game, she got more out of Lauren James than I think almost any like attacking players I've ever seen play with James in
Oh,
terms of the way they like were linking up and the connection I felt like they had. You know, normally with James, and I think I said this on Blue Royalty, you associate her with the like long dribbles or the sort of shots from the edge of the area, like not these like neat little passes into the penalty area, not this like drifting in. And that's what her and Mia were doing. And I was like, wow, like this is like a side of like LJ's game I've not seen before. And yeah,
mm,
Mia was facilitating that. So that'll be that overreaction.
I don't like
I don't think
that.
she's gonna like I don't think she's gonna get rid of Kerr, but I think she's like a serious backup option. Um and then my overreaction from the rest of the WSL, which I don't even think is that much of an overreaction, but Arsenal are horrid, and I don't think Jonas Eidevall lost the season in charge of the club.
I mean, that's what I said at the end of last season. I was like, I'm not as high on Arsenal. There's just so many question marks coming into the season with the ACLs and every like, yes, the talent's there, but I know from personal experience, an injury can really just mess everything back and taking your time, especially with so many question marks with injuries in women's football at the moment. It's just best to be cautious, especially with what they're trying to do with having all the matches at or having all these matches at Emirates and the attendance record and trying to build what they're doing there. Just I have City second, and that is just the dumb fan in me. I'm trying to every 6 months I feel like I step down and I'm less of just like a homer and I try to understand both sides. I'm sticking with the second because I do see the upside in seeing this match. I was very interested in hearing you say City in this upcoming match against Chelsea, the midfield is where we could potentially win. You also noticed that Yui was kind of being ignored in the midfield when I think she's one of our more important, obviously Jill, fantastic, but Yui is key. Even if it's just her spraying the ball around, I feel like she needs to get the ball at her feet early in the match. She could really be a good tempo setter. In our match against West Ham, there were just moments where the ball was just moving around. I don't think like West Ham really didn't have possession. City didn't really have possession of it, and I think it's just because there was a lot of just starting from the back and then bypassing everybody. Now we're in the wings, and then we lose the ball, and then we need to slow it down, get Yui involved. Uh, I I think I guess I don't even know what question I'm trying to get out of this. Is just I I just want to see. I don't even know. I don't know. Maybe something I said made sense to you. Town Bomb, you can finish it off. I I want to beat Chelsea. I know we can beat Chelsea because we've done it, but it's all been circumstantial. And I want to be hopeful. I'm just not hopeful. I don't know. I just wanted to talk, I guess. I'm sorry. Oh. Um, so
I um I mean your point about Yui like setting the tone like is important, but I think even though West Ham did have a new coach, I think it's kind of important to remember that like we did acquire Yui from West Ham, so like
mm,
those players know what she does well and what she doesn't do well. So maybe they had kind of a good game plan to make sure that she wasn't setting that tone of the match. Um, you mentioned Lauren James me official connection, and I think that as a U.S. fan, I think that we are hoping that at some point, maybe once Katarina Macario gets fit, like maybe that would be a nice connection between the two of those players with Catarina Macario playing at that 10 and Fischel playing up top. Um, I know that Emma has been really, really cagey about her Kat's health status. Do you, where do you see Catarina Macario fitting into Chelsea once she is fit?
Yeah, this is a bit, this is like a bit of a confusing one for me because of me official, because I kind of thought that when we signed Kat, the idea was that like Kat would end up being our like nine, like our sort of like Sam Kerr competitor backup. Like I know that's not like what she did loads of at Lyon, but like everything I've seen from her seems to have been like that's ultimately where she does want to end up, even though she can do lots of other things. Um, and then it's interesting, right? Because then you're like, okay, well, presumably me official's sort of the long-term view up there. And then you've got LJ who's saying like, I want to be a 10. I want to play central. So where does Kat Macario fit in? I mean, maybe there's a world where you play with kind of double tens and then you put Macario and James in together, sort of behind Fischel. Maybe James kind of gets sacrificed and shifted out wide to play on the right, and Kat ends up in behind. Um, Maybe Hayes is just so paranoid about injuries she's convinced no, the three of them will never be fit together because she had Harder, Kirby, and Kerr, and they barely ever played together, and maybe like as a result, she's just like fuck it, like I'm stressed, I need them all. I think never underestimate Emma Hayes' like capacity to be like I've just got to overthink everything because of like bad things that have happened to her in her career. So I think it's going to be really, really interesting. I think obviously it's not a problem Chelsea have to figure out right now. Like, I think they will take as much time with Macario as they need. Like, we saw that with LJ when she came in from United. She like didn't play for a year, and she didn't even have like a series. Like, she didn't have a serious injury. She was just sort of like building her body back up. Um, so like, I would be really surprised if we see Macario play for Chelsea before January. Um,
Mm.
so I just think Chelsea will feel like they don't need to rush it, and that Macario is like a player who they want to be the face of the club for the next like 5 years. So if you take that extra time, those extra months to make sure she's fit for all of that time, like that's no biggie. Like there's no need to rush her. But it'll be really interesting to see how sort of all of those players work out because like touch wood, Frank Kirby might stay fit for a season for once. Micah Hamano's like a super exciting player who can play as a 9 or as a 10, who was on loan at Hammarby but's like come back to Chelsea because she dislocated her arm at the World Cup. There's a lot of players floating around who can sort of play those attacking positions, and I feel like Emma Hayes is just going to kind of Hunger Games them all to figure out who wins.
It's not fair. I want some of those players. Uh,
Well, I will say I know that Sydney Parlow Cone and the rest of U.S. Soccer Federation will probably say if you need to just put Catarina Macario in bubble wrap when she plays or until she plays, please do so. And maybe she might actually be used in an international competition for more than 7 minutes, but we won't get into Vlatko Andonovsky today.
well, how do you see this match going this weekend between Chelsea and Man City?
I don't know. I always find these Chelsea City matches very tough. I think going away, I never really expect to go away to City and win because, as I say, it's been like we don't get a lot of them. It took us a really, really long time to ever win there in 90 minutes, and then we kind of like felt like we reverted to our old pattern, obviously, last season. I feel like it's maybe the sitting on the offense answer, but I could see a draw. I do think Chelsea will be up for it. I feel like there's, especially with Arsenal having already dropped points, there's a sense of like there's blood in the water. And I feel like also they'll want kind of revenge in inverted commas for that defeat before and feeling like maybe they didn't have everything at their disposal to like really play well in that game. But I think it's going to be a really interesting game, kind of regardless of the result. Like, I guess some of the stuff we've touched on, like tactically, I feel like these teams are going to match up in a really fun way. I think there's obvious areas for both of them where they could get exposed by the other. And I think it's just kind of going to be a case of in those individual battles, I think especially in the 1v1s, who comes out on top. And so much of that changes, like, depending on who plays. You know, it's like a very different
Mhm.
thing for Millie Bright and Jess Carter to have to defend up against Hemp, say, if she's going to play as the nine, a player they also know incredibly, incredibly well, obviously,
Mhm.
um, versus if like Bunny's going to play. You know, that's a totally, totally different prospect, and that kind of uncertainty, I think, is also what's going to make it really interesting.
Mhm.
Do, two quick things. Do you think that Bunny starting maybe allows Khadijah Buchanan to get a start, just because they have matched up recently together in international play? And do you feel that the Friday night match between United and Arsenal might change what a manager does, just because, as you stated, like with Arsenal dropping those 3 points, there is at home, there is kind of blood in the water there.
Yeah, I think in terms of Buchanan, my hunch right now would be that Carter and Bright are the first choice sort of centre backs for Chelsea, and maybe add Mielda into that as well. Um, it's a really interesting season, I think, for Buchanan at Chelsea. I think last year she really struggled, to be honest, and it wasn't what Chelsea fans expected at all. They thought they were going to get someone who was going to come in and really elevate the defense, and it kind of went the other way. And I think it was a bit of a blessing in disguise that she was injured towards some of the like really intense matches at the end of the season, and a player like Mielda did come in and she performed really, really well. You know, someone who I think a lot of Chelsea fans would have told you was kind of past it in some ways. Um, I For me, I'd be really surprised if Buchanan was like sort of thrown in this match. Maybe that would be different if Chelsea feel. I almost wonder if it'd be different if Chelsea feel Shaw isn't going to play in terms of like the speed that Buchanan would potentially offer as opposed to Mielda. Um, but yeah, I mean, again, this is just one of these questions where it's like so hard to judge after one game. Like, was Buchanan not playing because she flew back from North America and had played 2 games, or was she not playing because she's lower down that lineup? Like,
Mhm.
I just really don't know right now. In terms of the Friday game, I'm not sure if it'll affect like the way either team wants to play. But I do think there's a potential, like, especially if Arsenal lose, that both teams will already have in the back of their head, like, that they have some kind of buffer. You know, I think obviously everyone wants to win the league, but City will know this better than anyone else. Like, top three is really, really also what matters. I think to have Arsenal already sort of, um, well, I guess if City and Chelsea drew, it'd be like 4 points back. Um, I think that would be like almost a big relaxing feeling. But then City will know better than anyone as well that you can lose your first 2 games and you can actually be back in the title race.
Mhm.
Like you guys lost the first 2 games, and by February, March, like you were there and thereabouts. And it was only like
Yeah.
the then drop off at the end of the season
Mhm.
that kind of like sent all that into a spin. So I think both teams will still be focused on themselves, but maybe they'll just be excited from a gossip perspective. That's what I'd be excited from.
I mean, yeah, like, yeah, and I do think that it is really awesome that like you get like in week two you get, or in match day two you get these two very big matches like right off the bat. I think it'll like really set the tone for the league, like the top half of the table as a whole.
Yeah, and that's what kind of made it hard for City last year, right? Because we played you on match day two at home last year, and you know, I think in
Hmm.
hindsight, everyone obviously at the time losing to Villa was seen as a real shock, but where Villa ended up,
Yeah.
I think you look back and you say
Yeah,
actually losing to Villa and then losing to Chelsea with a totally new look team, like they weren't the worst results in the world.
yeah.
So, you know, I think it's very easy to draw grand conclusions after 2 games. And it's kind of fun, obviously. But I think if last year
Yeah.
taught us anything, especially from the City perspective, it's like you've got a lot of ups and downs to go before
Mhm.
actually everything kind of comes out in the wash.
Okay. I
Very
have one
true.
last question. How do you feel about Gareth Taylor?
Um, I think people are harsher on Gareth Taylor than is fair a lot of the time. I don't think he's as bad as everyone makes out, but I don't believe he has the tactical versatility to truly be a top coach. I think obviously City have done some slightly different things. Like if we look at how City played at the start of last season versus how they played against West Ham, I'd say you're kind of watching two different teams in that sense, like a team that's like developed. But I, for example, can't imagine City doing something vastly different against Chelsea on Sunday. Like I feel like we've kind of seen how they're going to play
Mhm.
from how they played against West Ham. And I think as seasons go on, that becomes very tough for a team then to overcome because part of what the more footage there is, the more easier it is to game plan against a team. We're talking about all the unknowns, but that's because we've only seen everyone play once. Once we've seen everyone play 10 times, like I would probably have a totally different set of answers for you. And I think my issue with Taylor would be that I don't think he's ever shown that he can have that kind of variety across a whole season of games.
That's fair. Very fair.
That is a very good
Gee,
criticism. That is probably one of our like mo Gareth Taylor is probably the most divisive
yes.
figure that we talk about on our
And it
podcast.
doesn't
Like
matter, men's or women. He
you,
just Gareth. Yes,
women's
he is
like
the most divisive.
the most divisive.
Yeah, and you said it. I That's kind of how I feel. I love listening to the manager's thought process. You don't get many chances to hear Garrett talk for the pre-match pressers, but when he does, and he does seem to get pressed about his mindset or why he thought and why he did the things he did, I find myself saddened or wanting more behind his reasoning, behind his thoughts. It just seems very blah, like very simple, or maybe he doesn't even answer the question. I feel like I need to know more in it, what he's thinking, and honestly, he might not be thinking more, and that just what leaves me wanting more from my manager, especially with such talent on the pitch.
Yeah, I think that's understandable. But I will also say at the same time, I think in the general media, he gets a lot of stick from people who don't actually necessarily watch Manchester City as
Mm-hmm.
much as Manchester City fans do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like the way, for example, someone like Jonas Eidevall is talked about versus someone like Gareth Taylor, for two managers who, in my opinion, like the gap isn't anywhere near as big as if you just like listen to how people talked about them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
That makes total sense. Yes.
I have nothing else from you. I felt like this was a great episode, and I want to ask too many questions because
Yes.
I'd love to have you back later in the season.
Yes.
You leave that
Absolutely.
thread.
Happy to hop back on whenever.
Yes, this was truly fantastic.
Fantastic.
Thank you again.
Yeah.
If you're interested in this type of thing, please let Shady Gang, our listeners, know how they can find you, get a hold of you, read the things that you are writing.
You can find me on Twitter at JessyJPH. I do a newsletter on flyinggeese.football. Get my own newsletter and website name right. And then I'm also on Counterpressed every week. If you want general women's football chat with me and Flo Lloyd Hughes.
Such great.
Also,
Awesome.
Also, congratulations to you qualifying for the Boston Marathon.
Oh,
I
thank
saw
you.
that on your Twitter file. That's really, really dope.
Yeah, I'm
Like,
buzzing. I
congratulations.
got in by 3 seconds. It's
Yeah,
wild.
Hey, doesn't matter. You got in. That's all.
you got in. It's
Like,
all that
so good on you.
matters.
That is entire. That's easily 18, 19 more miles than I probably would feel comfortable running right now. Yeah, so good, very good on you.
A, a smooth 22. A smooth 22.
Well, Shady Gang, please give it up for our guest one more time. Yes, truly, thank you. You have a great rest of your day. Oh, Oh wow! Look, it's a double motivation. Okay. Wow. Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Yes. Well, Shady Gang, we will see you very soon again. Hopefully, this got you all energized for our live watch along. We got to get that energy going. Be honest, social media was good, but you guys were a little flat on the match against West Ham. I need to see the energy up. I need to see the energy up. You know the vibes. Shady Gang, Shady Gang, Shady Gang.